Welcome to a very special, and when I say special, I truly mean special episode of Conversations. I'm your host, Hannah Trueblood, and the conversation that you're about to hear is with a really fascinating individual that I have had the pleasure of getting to know online. We actually met briefly a year ago in Chicago. We were both at an event called the Possibility Festival. Quick side note, July 26th, July 27th, Possibility Festival's coming to Valparaiso. Save the date. Please come. But anyway, we met at the Possibility Festival. He was filming. I was an attendee. And off air, he recounted that the last time that we met in person and saw each other in person, I was dancing in a circle drawn in chalk with strangers at a Southside Chicago city park. And that's 1000% true. That is what I was doing in that moment. It was a really beautiful weekend, and there were so many takeaways from the Possibility Festival. One of my absolute favorites was the opportunity to follow Evan on Instagram and to get to know each other. And we, over the last year, have had some really wild and interesting, deep, connective conversations. And I've actually gotten comfortable using voice notes thanks to Evan. So it is a very refreshing conversation, in my opinion. It's real, it's honest, it's everything that I want conversations to be. So I can't even, I've been trying to film this, record this intro for ever, and I just can't find the right words that do this conversation justice. And after 100 takes, I'm done. This is going to be what it is. You're hearing this. So obviously I posted it. I'm just going to go right into my intro, and then we're going to go right into the conversation. Sit back, enjoy the ride, and let me know what you think. Today's conversation is with someone who doesn't just tell stories, he lives them. Evan Bourcier is an award-winning filmmaker, photographer, entrepreneur, and host of the podcast Second Order Change. From creating compelling films for global brands like Apple and Walmart to exploring deeper truths about creativity, vulnerability, and authentic living, Evan's path, like mine, is refreshingly unconventional. He skipped traditional routes, dove in headfirst, and has built a successful creative business fueled by curiosity, courage, and a deep commitment to honesty and storytelling. He openly shares his insights and struggles, believing the strongest connections happen when we're brave enough to show our true selves. Evan is here today to talk about creativity, mental health, resilience, and what it means to genuinely connect with others through the stories we tell and the stories we live. So without further ado, welcome, Evan, to Conversations. This is such a fun thing for you to kind of maybe be on the other side of this. You're usually the guy kind of leading the storytelling. So thank you for being here on the other side.
The tables have turned, and I'm here for it.
I just recently did an interview for somebody else, and it was very fun to kind of be the person being asked the questions.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
It's fun. This is going to be a super special episode since we usually only film once a month. So you are my secret weapon, my extra spring sauce.
the bonus episode. Now we got to deliver. It better bonus. Be good.
I know, it better be good. Well, I guess we'll just we'll start off with a super fun question.
Okay. Just
to kind of kick it off, because we're not fans of icebreakers. We just like to go head first deep.
Okay.
So, in your work, you emphasize authenticity as a key to connecting deeply. When have you struggled the most with authenticity in your personal life, and how have you navigated that tension?
Ooh, boy. Yeah, skipping the icebreakers and getting right into it, huh?
Just right in.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few things that immediately come up for me. One is I spent a lot of my growing up time in a very conservative evangelical environment. Which was, I would just say not welcoming to a lot of aspects of the human experience. Emotionally, expressively, physically, like, you know, and that's like a whole ball of wax that almost like I can still feel myself being nervous to even talk about it because it's such like a touchy thing for some people. But like for me growing up, you know, it was like, we're not going to go watch that movie or that show because, like, the kids have a bad attitude or someone's, you know, whatever. And we would get our eyes covered when people were kissing in movies. And, like, we wouldn't watch Super Bowl halftime shows. And, you know, my mom would, like, flip Men's Health magazines in grocery store lines so that we wouldn't see women in bathing suits. And I feel like that for me, honestly, that was, like, a big seed of everything that was to come for me because it created this question for me that was, like, why, you know, there's like the world, and then why is there this world where we're making like a smaller version of the world? And I was confused even as a child that I was like, how come these things don't seem that scary to me? Why are the adults creating this weird little small quote unquote safe world? And I feel like I have to kind of pretend to stay in this world, like at youth group or Sunday school or whatever else. And then I'd like go to baseball practice on a Tuesday and you fall out with all the other teenage kids and you're just like, oh, we're all just humans here again now. Like there isn't all this weird posturing and then you'd like come back over and like pop back up into being like, for me, I was very much like a teacher's pet, like band kid. Like I was very into the whole church world too. I wasn't exactly like this like rebel with a cause sort of thing, but I just found myself in two worlds at the same time, and I was kind of very confused by that and wanted to explore that and wanted to understand more of like, how do these things become taboo? How do we relate to our emotions, to our experiences, and how do we create meaningful things that do connect with people, that do expand their sense of connection to their life, to their own value and validity. And for me at that point, like that was really challenging because even from like an artistic perspective, I felt like there were so many colors sort of taken off the palette that it's like, well, we don't touch that or 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 that. And it's like, okay, well, what's left? I guess we're going to retell the same story, which is kind of what tends to happen in that space, from my opinion. But so that was like, I think the big initial seed for me. And then more recently, I would say the tension there for me has been figuring out how to honestly and productively communicate things that I sort of like disagree with online. And that as I've been getting back into like teaching and what you could call like thought leadership and stuff, I've generally always been a pretty vocal person and I'm a pretty straight shooter. And I had a period a few years ago where I just repeatedly got some really rough backlash for saying things that I didn't think were that controversial. And I think I got a little bit gun shy of actually just like saying it how I see it. And I got a little bit back into that mode of being like, well, someone could take this way or someone could take it personally or whatever else, which is never my intent. But I think that's another space that just like, there's a lot of things that I am very comfortable expressing in that space. But figuring out how to be like, this is actually not serving everyone, and there are better ways that we can do this. I sometimes still struggle with that. And so I'll like walk up to the edge and I'll like start recording something and go like, I probably just shouldn't. And I feel like that's another place that I've been like hyping myself up to just be like, what you have to say is valuable. And maybe some people will take it that way and whatever, but like, you're not a douche. And hopefully most people see that. But that's a long-winded answer to your question. But those are the two things that immediately came up.
Oh, I love it. But it's funny, like when you mention about saying things that you wouldn't consider to be controversial and then kind of second guessing for a while about what you were going to be posting about. I have always been a pretty vocal person, but being in real estate is always this like idea that you can't like share your personal opinions and you can't commingle that with business and stuff. And I was very, very out about certain things. Like I made a post in 2022 about abortion rights, and this real estate agent that's been around for 150 years was like, oh, there goes your career, good luck. And it was so interesting because I had that moment where I was like, okay, I could either take this advice or I can go with what feels like my right thing. And it ended up really working out. Like my business is doing better than his. So
right. Well, and I think that's the scary part of it, is that so often that's true. And like, I know that. And it's funny because like I talk about that and then I still get up to the edge of being like, but someone's going to have something to say about it. And it triggers that, whatever it is, that abandonment wound, that fear, that like you're going to get kicked out of the club thing. But I remember I had one, this was probably 2021, 2022. I was back more consistently sharing like short form stuff. And I had shared something just like, to me, the moral of the story was we should not lie to clients. And it was about like having more update conversations throughout creative projects. Where like sometimes you just get through, like some of this stuff is big. We're doing big commercial stuff. It takes months. It costs a lot of money. And someone will have like made a deck really early on, right? That's like a 3-page thing. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense anymore. Like that sentence. And we should just talk about making sure that doesn't make any sense anymore. And like, here's what we're doing instead. But a lot of times people will not. They'll just be like, well, the check cleared and that's what it said. And so we're just going to do what the deck says, whether or not it makes sense anymore. That's crazy to me. If we're spending $200,000 of someone's money, we should at least just be like, hey, based on everything we've learned in the last 3 months, here's what we should actually do now. I had some quick way of saying that in 90 seconds. And I got a phone call from a director who I barely know, who spent an hour telling me that I'm an angry person and this is why nobody likes me. And in hindsight, I now am like, oh, I touched a nerve in you. And then you had to come take it out on me. But, like, I wasn't personally attacking anyone. I'm not saying anything that crazy, right? But that, like, that's the weird thing about, even to your point, you say something that you believe in. And so often our internalized fear narrative is like, oh, well, your career's over. You can't be that person and see that or have a feeling about that or whatever else it may be. And it's like, it reminds me of I was probably 19, was doing one of my first like commercial projects, and it was this old timey guy who was like, you got to wear button ups if you want to get budgets. And it was just like, this is not true. This is objectively untrue. All of the most expensive things I've ever worked on are the goofiest gang of like rapscallion, like filmmaker pirates who are not professional looking in the traditional sense in any way, and nobody cares. But these stories, and that I think is part of the shift that has really happened in my life the last few years, is going from even just looking at creative outputs and going like, how do we relate to these stories and interact with these stories and these fears, and how is the work that we're putting out into the world either reinforcing those narratives or helping shift those narratives? And how can we help equip people, to take you as an example, to be like, no, you can be a successful entrepreneur, mom, you can be vocal about things you believe in. Like, these are all viable options. And this like all or nothing, you have to be one linear thing idea is just kind of crazy to me. And so that's where it's been a real journey to go back through like all of this creative experience and then learn more about human psychology and physiology and spirituality and go like, how do we use these things to just help unlock things for people? Because I feel like so often at least my feeling still so often like logging on the internet is that it's just this like oppressive barrage of noise that doesn't feel encouraging or validating. It feels very fearful. And so like that was another place, was like, okay, I had these experiences as a kid. I've had these experiences as a professional. How do I use all of these skills to then actually engage with this thing that's going on? Because like selling Tide Pods is okay at the end of the day, but it's not my most favorite thing anyway.
Yes. Well, okay. So that leads to a very good question. You kind of like almost said it when you mentioned the Tide Pods. Your resume has some pretty impressive large brands that are, globally recognized. And then you've also got some little guys that no one would ever know. Probably not even their next door neighbor would know who they were. And both of them you treat them, you provide the same level of service, whoever it is, whether it's a $1 budget or $1 million budget. And you mentioned the gray area and how there's, one way of thinking or no way of thinking, but there's this really beautiful place in the middle where where two things can be true at the same time. And I feel like a lot of people, this is a long-winded question. I feel like a lot of people who are trying to move up in their life or their business or whatever they're doing struggle with that. Like, if you have a moral compass, how can you work for Walmart, who, when you look at them from the outside, you're like, oh, like all bad. So how do you juggle that, being able to kind of find where you're able to put your spin on things and feel good about doing it while still working with people that maybe you wouldn't traditionally agree with.
Yeah. I mean, that's a billion-dollar question. I think that for me, there's like a few pieces of it. One is there are organizations that I'm just like objectively not aligned with for whatever reason. And like I have said no to projects because of stuff like that. There are a lot of organizations that fit into what I would call like gray areas, and much like the way that people, I don't know, take politics. It's like there are people who think Walmart's the devil, and there's people who think that Walmart is God's great gift to low-income families. And it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of subjectivity inside of that. We did a couple projects last year with Johnson & Johnson, which is another company that some people may think is the absolute devil and that some people may be fond of. And I think it probably depends on your circumstances. Like, they're much like us as individuals. Any of these organizations are complex, right? And so like for me, when we came in and we were working with Johnson & Johnson, it was like, what's the mission here? And the mission was to tell the story of a man who's an ESPN anchor who had a heart arrhythmia that was severely inhibiting his life, and that his doctor had resigned him to being on prescription pills, beta blockers, for the rest of his life. And it wasn't working for him. He went out and got a second opinion, found out that there was this other treatment where he could get a heart ablation done, immediately was able to get off all pills, immediately went back to like normal state of life, was able to sleep consistently again. And to me, that's a story worth telling. That seems like a better option. You know, if I was talking to my siblings and they were going through this, I would be like, you should go check out this procedure. And I'm not going to say that you should go get it because I'm not a medical expert, but I'm going to say that there's another option here. And so I think like that's an example to me of where like it is not my job to be responsible for all of what Johnson & Johnson does. And I do not take that as I do not take our collaboration on something as evidence of like perfect, endless alignment. I think there's a moment in there where we are aligned in the mission that we're on and how we can tell that story well to serve people. And so I will say for me, there is a bigger piece of, I do care about telling stories that feel like they matter. I do care about impact. And so for me, I would even say it's more like on a project by project level sometimes than it is like a client level. Because like straight sales just isn't actually that compelling to me. I think sales inside a narrative context, sales inside of an emotional context, sales inside the context of like, who are you? Why do you do what you do? What are the life experiences that have led you to have the values that you have and show up the way that you show up? And like, how does that come out into your work and into your life? And where does it come from the core of your being? That's a sales pitch to me still. And it's the thing that I resonate my decisions off of and who I want to work with and who I want to interact with. But when we come back to like, save 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance, it's just like, it's kind of fun to play movie, but to me, it's not the most resonant thing. And just to touch on one other part of your question, I think that for me, there's also an aspect of like, you have to do right sizing and scoping, and like, you can't make $1 million out of $1 all the time. But I am very firmly of the belief that like how you show up should be consistent. And so like how I show up, if we are working on a nonprofit project in Haiti for 2 weeks, or if we're showing up for a $250,000 lottery campaign, I'm the same person. I have the same perspective. I have access to the same skills, resources, tools, and like our ability to deploy massive lighting packages and stuff may not be there in Haiti, but like the overall philosophy, attitude, and energy is going to be the same. And for me, if I'm going to say yes to something, if I'm going to show up to something, I want to show up fully. And if I'm tiptoeing to the edge of something, and I have done this many times in my life where I'll say yes and then I'll be kind of like half-assing it, it's like I probably should have just said no. But if I'm going to say yes, like there was also a shift that I made a few years ago that was like, I don't do favors. We either do real work or gifts. And we will do gifts. Like there's probably stuff you see in your portfolio. It's like, what the fuck is this? And it's like, we just went out and did it because we wanted to do it. And it's like, but we're not walking into this weird, like, you're kind of giving us money that feels like a lot to you and doesn't feel like anything to us. And now there's like this weird mixed expectations. It's like, we're either doing it for real or we're doing it as a gift. And if we do it as a gift, we're still doing it for real. We're just not expecting anything in exchange. And that like also clears up a lot of murkiness that can be created in these situations. But yeah, so I think for me, it's just like values, impact, and it's an ongoing evolution of like learning what you care about, what you resonate with, where you want to show up. And like I would say for me, like the last few months, I've been in kind of a murky place with all of that and just being like really looking at like what is the next chapter and like is it less even like video production or photo focused and is it more doing storytelling workshops with people and helping them understand their story and their brand and their values. Cause like I can talk about metaphors and emotions and all these things all day long. And like, I'm really good at cameras and lights and all that, but it's my current vulnerable, scary place is being like, maybe this isn't it at all anymore. You know, maybe it's more of a consulting thing and we happen to also be able to do execution. I don't know. I'm devolving off your question, but all that to say that like I think it's at least my experience has been that is a constant evolution, you know? Mm-hmm. And so like when I was starting out, it was like big brands were the North Star. I want to go work with stuff that's on TV. And then you do big brands and get a couple million views and then it's like, okay, now what? And like big brands can still be a part of that, but I learned just a little bit more about myself to be like, here's the more of the things that actually resonate with me now.
So when you first started in all of this, was your mindset the same just in terms of being really committed to telling the story? Like that was the get from the beginning, or was there a different perspective that you had that changed once you got in the biz?
So I think that like there's a through line that's consistent there. I mean, I think when I started, I was mostly just curious because I didn't know anything. I was not, you know, I meet a lot of people who are like, I always wanted to be a film director growing up or something. And like, I didn't have any of that. I really liked art growing up, like classical art. I really liked music. I don't know if it's just like a skill thing or a nervous system thing. Like my fine motor control is not great. Like my handwriting sucks. I was not a good artist in that way. But so like I got Photoshop when I was 16. That was the first time that I felt like I could make things that actually felt representative of like what I was feeling. And then I got a camera at 18 as a Christmas present, was working 2 minimum wage jobs at the time, and decided to just like quit both and wholesale myself into figuring this world out. And that was the last paycheck that I got before my own company's paycheck, like however many years later. But at that point, it was just like, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about anything from like photography to video. Like, obviously I interact with these things, but I have no clue how they get made or what the system is. And so I remember like I went to an event in Austin, and this was just under a year after getting the camera. And I had been like shooting some church videos and doing some engagement photos for friends and like just trying to find ways to make stuff, you know? And I go to this event and there's like a cocktail hour. And, you know, everyone's like, hey, I'm the VP of National Geographic Channel. Hey, I'm a assistant camera at this person. Hi, I'm a cinematographer. Hi, I'm a gaffer. What do you do? And I was like, I don't know what any of these things are. Like, I literally, every single word you just said is above my pay grade. I make videos, and sometimes people see them. And so, like, that first few years for me was swallowing the ocean in a lot of ways. It was just like going in and learning everything I possibly could about this big black box, because this is also pre YouTube being a big thing. Like YouTube University, I was one of the people creating YouTube University at that point. Did a whole bunch of YouTube work myself, built a channel, but was just like going out and talking to professionals and being like, how do commercials get made? What is a budget like for these things? How do you buy an $80,000 camera? I don't know how any of this works. And so that first few years was just like trying to get a sense of what the heck was going on. The next few years was getting really good at execution. And so that was like the pocket where I was doing Bose and Walmart and Apple and feature documentaries and all this stuff. And I was just like traveling all the time, doing big work, speaking at conferences. And then I got super burnt out. I was 260 pounds, on the verge of divorce, at the peak of my career at the time, and absolutely miserable, making more money than I knew what to do with, and I hated everything about my life. I remember I was like home one night talking to I wouldn't even say he was like a close friend, but like kind of a friend. And I was just like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like I've checked every box that I thought I was supposed to check. I have 20,000 Instagram followers. I'm working for big brands. I have all this equipment. I made $50,000 this month. I'm getting flown all over the country. And I hate everything about my life. And I call it my come to Jesus moment, because it was like, okay, who are you really, and what do you really care about? And are you willing to go after that? And I think that is such a big lesson, and it's a lesson that I don't know you learn any other way. It's just like all the cliches about how like that stuff doesn't matter, but there comes a point where it's like, no, I have it all and it doesn't matter, and I don't want it anymore. And so like I remember I had, this sort of visionary moment. I was driving home from therapy one night, and there was like this fork in the road, and it's like either I move to LA, get divorced, continue doing what I'm doing, like film educator, influencer, whatever, or I like burn it all down, go to therapy, get in shape, start over, figure out who the heck I am. And for whatever reason, chose door number 2. So I went and archived my 5,000 person Facebook group. I deleted my Instagram. I shut down our podcast that was getting like 8,000 downloads an episode every week. I deleted 2 Patreons. I like murdered myself off the internet in a day.
Wow.
And was like,
okay.
I'm just not, I can't. Because I was like, if I limp this along at all, I will keep doing it. Like I need to force myself to stop. Shut it all down, went dark. Got a lot of backlash from that, which like I totally understand now. At the time, it was more emotionally confusing though to have people be like, "You're so selfish." But yeah. So I did that and went and got super in shape over the next few years and did a lot of therapy and like straightened a lot of things out for myself and my values and all of that. And so yeah, like there's been all this to say there's been seasons of where it's changed, right? Where it's like you have that learning phase and then you have like execute at the highest level phase. Then you have actually this isn't working phase. And so then now it's like I feel like I was in an upswing kind of coming out of that. I was doing a lot of like commercial documentary work on the back end of that and was working on a documentary about Roberto Clemente when COVID hit. And then COVID sort of killed all the like big travel work, which was pretty much all that I was doing because there's not a lot going on in Connecticut. And that's when Challenger kind of got born because I was like, well, I've got to figure out what I'm doing if I'm not flying around and doing all this big film work. And that was the first moment for me that like I spent a few months sitting around and was like, I still love all of this stuff. Like I love really high-end creative execution. I love filmmaking. I love photography. But like if I were to build a brand now, it would have much more to do with like values and how we show up and an ethos than it would about a vertical or any of these other things. Like I kept sitting there and, there's all these branding exercises, right? That like I've heard that's like, oh, we do training videos for realtors or we do lead gen for whatever. And I was like, honestly, I just, for me, put a gun in my mouth. Like none of those things feel satisfying at all. We could do it and there's $1 million sitting there. Like if we just committed to doing patient testimonials for pharma companies, there's $1 million sitting there. But I have a hard time with that. And so the more that I sat with it, it was like these aspects of curiosity, courage, how we're telling stories, understanding emotional depth, understanding more of like the mythological and metaphorical frameworks that we're actually using to navigate life and applying those back into commercial work and rebridging, for me, also rebridging art and commerce back together, because I feel like we've gone so far to this idea that like commerce is just commerce and values don't matter and it's all just ROI and as long as it works, it works. And I'm like, first of all, fucking insane, because we still have to experience all of it. And so I have to live through your shitty sales pitch and I have to watch your content and all these other things. It should still be a good experience, which is one of my baselines for like art. But so that's been this new era of then I went down this huge rabbit hole of Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and all these things, and it's like bringing this whole new level of awareness online. And then now, as I'm in this current liminal state of like selling my house, figuring out moving, going like, how do I use all of this awareness to serve people now? And the honest answer is I don't know. And that I'm sitting here with a journal for 3 hours every day going like, something's going to come out of me and it's going to get clear at some point. But where I am right now, I just have 13 years of a whole ton of experience, and I know that I'm a weapon and I know that I have all these gifts. And I don't quite know how it fits into the world now with everything that's going on, social media, geopolitically, whatever. So it's a very, very, very long answer to your question, but there's a through line, I would say, that's the same. But the phases change around that sort of like essence.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's so much goodness in there. I wish we had like 3 hours to just hear.
You can always do it again.
I'm gonna have to fly out to Connecticut and like just do like a weekend intensive at the coffee shop.
We could rip it.
Oh man, that would be fun. So, well, I'm glad that we're doing this now because I feel like there's a ton of content out there already. There's 1,000,001 interviews, Mel Robbins and whoever else, and they're always talking to these people that are on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
and they've made it and they did it, and like this part is done, and now they're kind of thriving in their moment. And you are in a really interesting, unique, scary, exciting, like place,
Mm-hmm.
like that is you're trying to sort out like what is next, and you have some experience and you know that there's something there, but you're not quite there.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that there's so many people that get caught in that moment
Mm-hmm.
where you're at now. I mean, and honestly, I'm kind of in a weird transitional, not sure what I'm transitioning into yet phase also.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like nothing out there really that I've found that offers any sort of like any sort of relief from that confused feeling of like, well, I'm doing things,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not there yet. So what advice would you give to people who are in this space with us right now that, they see the people who haven't made it and they're like, well, that's not quite me. They see the people who have made it and they're like, well, that's not quite me either.
Right.
What am I doing?
Right. So wonderful question. There's a few things that immediately come up for me. One is, it's really easy to look at people who look like they've got it together and think that they have got it together. But like if you took me from like quote unquote that peak of my career thing, it's like, oh, Evan's like big commercial cinematographer. And that was, as far as like identity simplicity goes, that was the easiest point. It was like, I shoot big commercials. Easy answer, easy thing. My identity's clear. My ego's happy. We go out, we execute on that. Internally, I was a hellscape. So external and internal, those things are not always aligned. And sometimes it's easy to look at people, and I think there are a lot of people who it does work out for, and they have like this very clean, simple outline thing. There's a quote, I'm trying to remember who it's from. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's something to the idea of like, the curse of knowing what you want to be is that you will be it. And that the
Okay.
blessing of not knowing is that you get to be so many things. And so I think there's a degree of that. And I think there is a degree of like, I don't know, this is kind of like a big philosophical topic, but it's like, are we all supposed to have landing points? I don't know. Like maybe some of us are the filling in the cracks, bridging things that are not bridged by the major labels, whatever it may be. And the world, as it gets more and more connected technologically, there's more and more room for that as well. But, I think as far as like, if you're in that space, that middle space, some uncomfortable thing I would say is that space never actually goes away. You just think that you're out of it, but it reminds me of, I was working with a friend. They have a board game company down in Nashville, and they were doing the big Kickstarter launch for their new game. And we were filming all night, all day. They're up doing 20-hour days. And I was like, they just finished the launch. They had like kickstarted $1.5 million or something. And I asked Zach, I was like, so what's up? And he's like, we did it. Did we? The game's not done. We have to go back and work on it more tomorrow. And it's not going to ship for 6 months. But we hit our Kickstarter goal. And we always want to have this moment that we like celebrate that it's done, but it's never actually done. Like when, I guess, right? And I don't know. I was sitting there and I was like, I hate how much I love that this is so real right now. There is no, I've made it. There are people who I'm sure could go on here and look at my portfolio and go, he's made it. That's where I want to be. And I'm sitting here in the deep turmoil of where do I go next and how do I use these things? And my friend Mitchell, who we're working with a lot, he's doing almost 500,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, totally independent, and to a lot of people it would be perceived as super successful. And we're still sitting there having conversations around like, what do we do? Where do we spend the next $1,000 to build this thing, right? And so like you're always in that tension of creation. You're always in that middle space of the minute you take a step, you're now between where you were and where you're going to go again, right? Like the nowness of it is sort of a fundamental tension, and that learning to actually be okay with that, with not having all the answers, with not being totally settled, with not being totally resolved, and that like there are moments where everything feels really clear for a while, and those are great and enjoy them, and there are moments where it all gets very cloudy again, and that's normal and part of the process. But like for me, I would say, and this is where I come back to sort of like a metaphorical lens, monarch butterflies dissolve in the chrysalis. They don't turn into a butterfly until they turn into nothing. Like they literally just turn into goop. And there's been a few times in this process or going through a divorce and like emotional stuff where I'll start hitting that level of just like, there's nothing to hold on to. And I just remind myself, just be goop.
Just be
goop. You can be a butterfly tomorrow. Let's worry about being a butterfly later. Right now, the job of you in the cocoon is to be goop. And it's all going to be okay. And then you wake up tomorrow and you go, is there something that I have to do here? Is there something that's calling me? Is there something that feels resonant? But for me, I think there's that continual process, at least in my life, of learning to let go of a lot of like external influence, a lot of external narrative. And the goopiness is that letting go of your attachment to the things that you normally would have used as reference points, whether that's family or culture or whatever else, and to just go like, actually, that's not relevant either. And then I have to go back into like what feels good to me, what feels resonant, and that place of actually feeling those things and making decisions from that place of like internal authority and internal integrity are always the decisions that end up having the like biggest impact in my life. But they are the decisions that generally I feel like goop going into. You're just like, this may be nothing. This may be crazy. Like, and it is crazy. And I think that's another important, I was talking to a friend the other day about this. This is another sort of like archetypal metaphorical lens, but there is no progress without the fool. That it's like from the tarot perspective, it's like the fool always predicates the king. And so he was talking about me and like some stuff I've been doing on my stories, and he was like, it's funny because like, and he said something about how you're not making a fool of yourself. And I said, no, I am making a fool of myself. That is on purpose. And David Goggins doing what he did was a fool for a long time. And you getting out there and writing your anger into songs and putting them on Spotify is a crazy, foolish thing to do. And like deciding that I'm going to sell houses is a foolish thing to do when you have no evidence, you have no history, you have nothing to point back on. All you have is evidence why this would be a dumb idea, really, outside of whatever the thing is inside you that still says this is the thing you should do. But that the decision, every time you listen to that thing and you make something way better than it deserves to be, put all this depth into a creative project that, you know, most of the advice now would be like, don't bother. You really care about a client interaction. You go above and beyond. Like, these are all foolish things to do on a certain level. But you do not become king of any kingdom without first being a fool. And so when you're in that place, it's like, maybe this is your lesson. Maybe the murkiness, the goopiness, the in-betweenness is because the world has already had enough of that. The world has already had enough of the realtors who just show up and know how to do paperwork and move along. Maybe the world's ready for realtors who actually like engage with people as they're going through massive life transitions and talk about actual life things. Maybe the world is ready for commercial storytelling that actually connects people to like felt impact in their life and communities and doesn't just sell pain points to people, any of these things. But when you are the process of creating something new, you are creating something previously non-existent. You are pulling something from the void into reality, which means you are sitting, staring into the void and going, tell me what we need now. Tell me of all the things that do not exist, of all the unknown unknowns, like the peak mystery and magic of it all, that I'm going to sit with the unknown, hear what it whispers to me, and then do that even though it makes no gosh darn sense. That's magic. And to me, that's the thing that we all have to do, whatever your domain is, whether you're showing up as a mom, whether you're showing up as a athlete, whether you're showing up as a writer. It's like that is the game, actually. And that is the thing, learning to sit in that discomfort, to sit in that tension, to sit in the I don't know, to sit with a pen and a blank piece of paper and go, who cares what everyone else says? What do you say? Is the scariest thing in the world, and it's the bravest thing in the world to answer. But so for someone sitting in that place, I would say you're doing everything right. By being in this place, you are already so far ahead of most people who do not have the courage to even acknowledge that that place exists. And they will sit in their boxes until the day that they die. And that the decision to walk outside of every known box and to go sit in the cloud of unknowing and go, what could I be and how could I show up, is a courage that the world could use a whole lot more of, and that if you can just learn to be comfortable there, I guarantee you will get the answers you're looking for. But the biggest point is just to learn to be comfortable in the uncomfort that comes with that space.
Just dropping bombs all day long over here.
Bonus episode. You gotta make it good.
We dropped the mic. Just the whole hour is just dropping mics. Well, it's interesting. Like a lot of what you say really rides on just having faith.
Mm-hmm.
And, you come from, like you said, an evangelical background where there was a lot of repression and there's a lot of, it is interesting because we have such a religious fueled society. Like everything that we know pretty much is built off of this concept that this person up there or this being is like watching what you do. Mm-hmm. And if you do good, if he likes what you do, then you're going to be rewarded. And if he doesn't like what you do, you're going to be punished. Mm-hmm. And so there's so much of this, like, put everyone in a box and, I have to conform to whatever this idea of good is and avoid whatever this idea of bad is. What's your experience been like, or what is your relationship like with God or with religions after coming out of being in that area that you didn't like and that didn't fit you? Now that you're kind of off on your own and you're exploring your own life and existence and meaning, where does religion and faith fit in with you now?
It's a wonderful question because it's scary to answer honestly. I think one of the things that has come up for me a lot in the last few years has been this sort of question of like, how do we relate to these things and how do these things relate to each other? And so for me, there are certain rational sort of like if-then things that to me don't work for me. And one for me is like the idea that this life is some kind of a prank test loading screen that you have to disengage with and pretend is nothing to then get access to the real game after you die is a hard pill for me to swallow. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's actually what we're talking about. It comes back to what are we talking about when we're talking about any of this, and the difficulty of talking about deep experiential mysteries of being human, which I think is the nature of so much of what is like sacred and spiritual. But so like for me, that doesn't work for me. And when I see how I was raised, if you believe that like you get a get out of hell free card, and that if you believe or do the wrong thing, you can lose it and be punished forever, then the way that people act, which is get your get out of hell free card and then turtle until you die makes sense. Like, that's the best game strategy to use in that game. That is not a world that I want to live in where we all do that. And so to me, that's actually what makes it indefensible. It's like, if we were to all live this way, the world would be garbage. And so I fundamentally reject that, because the consequences of believing that on how I would live and how we would all live would be insane, in my opinion. So, you know, to me, there's a few questions there, which is like, how do I relate to life? How do I relate to my understanding of myself inside of life and my role inside of life? And so, like, for me, I would say that my experience is that so often the way that we relate to those stories that we tell about God or the universe are stories that we end up deeply internalizing about ourselves. And that when you live in the world of a very, like, judgmental and fearful God, that you tend to have a lot of very judgmental and fearful projections out into the world around you. And when you're in it, it's hard to see that, because it just seems like the right way to be. But then as you, like, step out and relax a little more, you go, oh, this, like, for me, it was like, there was a point where I was like, oh, everyone isn't worried about the world ending all the time. Like, this is a very, like, how I was raised kind of thing. So there's that piece. And so, like, when I can look at a lot of things now that, like, there are aspects of the Bible, even in Bible stories, that I look at now, and from a deep experiential metaphorical level resonate with me so much more than they did as a kid, that I'm like, this is so true. It's crazy how true this is. But when people ask me, like, so are you a Christian? I'm always like, what does that mean to you? Because if you asked me when I was 9, he would say I'm a heretic. So I don't know, you know, like, what does that even mean? And so for me, I guess back to the question, it's like, I believe that life is fundamentally valid, that life is fundamentally valuable, that life is fundamentally more complex than we could ever understand, and that it is choosing to go through all of these wild experiences and all of these perspectives and all of these expressions and colors, and being everything from a crazy toucan to a turtle to a pole dancer to a construction worker. Like, all of these things are diverse manifestations of existence itself, and that I mysteriously am here, wherever this is and whatever this is. And I think we skip that part too often, that we act like we have any clue what this is or how we got here to begin with. I am here in this, and it's incredible, and that I am given the opportunity to listen and to learn and to engage and to reciprocate and to express and to act and to be in that space. And that I find that the more that I listen deeply and that I reciprocate from a deep place, the more complex it gets, the more emotionally deep it gets, the more connected I feel. In some ways, I wouldn't even say the harder it gets, but just like the deeper it gets. And that somehow in the midst of that deepening, there is beauty still, that there are more layers. And so, like, I also believe that we are given dreams for a reason. And that part of this great mystery is that whatever is making up all of this has things that it wants to happen too. Call that God, call that whatever you want. But somehow if you want to take it from a scientific materialist perspective, the atoms that make up the universe seem to have desires, and they orchestrate things to make those things happen. And I've been in that position where you do something and things that don't make any sense happen that help make that thing happen. So I don't believe that there's some grumpy old man in a cloud who doesn't like when I say fuck. I don't think he cares. I think that he watches blue whales eat 10,000 krill every day and nature's metal and that the divine is actually so much more diverse than we give it credit for in our Western American way of viewing it. I think that the experience of life is the thing that I'm here for, because it's the only reason to be here. And if this were not what I was here for, I would be somewhere else. And so I choose to say that this experience, even when it doesn't make any sense, even when it's murky, even when it's confusing, even when it's overwhelming, even when I just want to cry and puke my brains out or whatever else, is okay. And that there are things that I'm learning, and there is a reason that I am here too, and something that I have to give to this, and that I will show up every day in service to whatever that is. And whatever comes of it is what's going to come of it. And that the dream inside me is valid, the dream of the people around me are valid. And if I were to get a little meta, this whole experience as a dream itself is valid. And so when I say long live the dream, it is an affirmation of our personal dreams, our personal aspirations, of our collective vision for the future, of the reality of life itself, and of the idea that life itself figures it out better than I do, and that I'm going to choose to affirm all of it, and even when it doesn't make any sense, it's going to be okay. So that is my theological dictum of the day.
You do a really great job of putting into words what I struggle to explain sometimes.
You just got to sit for 4 years not having any clue how to say it. This is the first time I've ever said it out loud, so I appreciate that.
Sweet. You heard it here first, folks. My husband and we have very interesting philosophical and theological conversations. He was raised a Jehovah's Witness and is now like a nothing exists after death atheist. Okay. And I was raised in a loose Lutheran household to a mom turned agnostic turned atheist when I was in elementary school, and kind of just I think it's bogus, but if you want to believe in that, that's your prerogative. Mm-hmm. Go ask questions. Don't just assume everything is fact and then go from there. So now I'm more of I believe in science, but I also believe in the universe, and I also think this is all just a simulation, and somebody is watching Truman Show style on everything that's going on, and we're just, I don't know, that gives me peace for some reason. Some people that fries their brain, they can't comprehend not being real. Me, I'm oh yeah, none of this is real. I can literally do whatever I want. I'm in a dream.
Yeah, well, so you bring up a great point, which we could devolve on, and I don't want to because I want to make sure we wrap this up in the time we have. But it's all of those things are true in a certain level. Even the idea that it's there's nothing after death or nothing outside of death. It's well, yes, because anything outside of it would still be life. So then the question is really how do we navigate death? Is death final? Which then brings me more back to the question of what are we? Because the energy doesn't get created or destroyed. We're made out of the same stuff that Jesus and the Romans were. So they've continued to exist and now have new names and now make videos on the internet. I don't know. But then also to your point, I personally have a small bone to pick with the simulation thing, because a simulation is fundamentally a abstracted imitation of something else. Mm-hmm. And it's so when people say this is a simulation, I'm just of what? Life is a simulation of life? Yes, it is a weird 3-dimensional physical, emotional, embodied experience, which I feel is what we're kind of getting at with simulation. But simulation is an imitation of something. And I don't understand what this would be an imitation of, and I have not personally heard a really compelling answer to that. But that's where I do come back to. I think a dream is a better example of it than a simulation, in that when you're in a dream, who's making the dream?
It's kind of open-ended that way.
Is it you? Is it something other than you and you're in there? I don't know. It feels like it's me because it feels very specific to me. But it's also this was actually one of the things that really messed me up a few years ago for a week, because I really vividly remembered a dream, and I was singing songs and I could draw drawings, and I was wait, the part of me that's dreaming is creating architecture that I've never seen before and writing songs that I've never heard before. And that, to me, that's also whatever that deep, creative, divine spark thing is. The part of you that is capable of dreaming is the part of you that's capable of creating anything. And it is fundamentally beyond our understanding still of like, how does that part of you write music in your dreams? And how does it know that your mom's your grandma, even though she's in your sister's body? And like, what is all of this? But it's operating on a deeper level of understanding than we generally are in our like waking awareness. But anyway, not to get bogged down, but I think the simulation thing is fair. I think it's closer to a dream. And I think that's where when you look back at like a lot of Vedantic stuff or whatever else, Bhagavad Gita, you know, it's like the mystery of it all is that we are somehow the dreamer and the dream, and we're just like enmeshed in all of it, you know.
We're goop.
We're goop, and it's all gooping around us.
I love it. I'm gonna goop around and find out.
Exactly.
I'm putting that on a shirt.
For the love of the game, you know, the universe decided to bind itself into this crazy experience so that it could have it.
It's incredible. Well, got like 4.5 minutes left before we gotta get out of here. So I have one last question for you, but before I ask it, tell everyone that's listening where they can find you and how to connect.
Best place to find me lately is probably Instagram. So it's my first initial and my last name. I'll let you figure that out either in the show notes or reading this or whatever. But yeah, at Bourcier on Instagram. We're going through website overhauls right now for myself and Challenger. But my website's the same as my Instagram. If you wanted to reach out, my email is evan@challengermediahouse.com, and I'm always down to chat. Very down, like if people want to connect, you know, back to the murkiness of it all, like I am interested in taking on some more sort of just like story processing work with people. And we're doing a lot of like brand alignment messaging type work just to help people bring more cohesion into their stuff, make sure that everyone understands what they're saying, make sure that they understand what they're saying. And we do a lot of killer photo and video work as well. And I just love to connect with people. So if any of that is interesting, hit me up. But those are the best places to find me.
Excellent. And all that, I will cheat. All of it'll be in the show notes and all that good stuff. So you can be lazy and just click the link. You don't have to know how to spell.
Shoot me a DM. Actually, no, I will say that. I really appreciate DMs and I really appreciate voice messages and stuff. So if any of this landed, and I will say this is a tip that I mentioned on our podcast too. People do these things and you never hear anything. If you ever listen to a podcast, send Hannah a message. Send me a message. Send someone something. Because it goes out into the void and the numbers are cool, but they feel bad. And someone saying, hey, that resonated with me is life-changing. So selfishly for myself and also just for the whole ecosystem of people who make stuff like this, if any of it lands, just shoot someone a message.
Exactly. And it's funny that like we met at in Chicago like not even a full year ago. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember if you messaged me or if I messaged you or how it came to be, but we have been like exchanging voice messages and just like totally being buddies online for a while. And it's so fun and refreshing. And I always enjoy like seeing your stories, and they're just so thought-provoking and different and interesting, and you're funny.
I appreciate that.
And you're just like a real person. So
I am in the midst of the simulation, still a real person.
yeah, as real as the simulation allows us to be. So like, you know, connection with social media and all of this stuff, we are able to communicate more than ever, but we connect less than ever, and that's like a huge part of, you know, the question of Possibility Festival and all of those things that we'll not get into right now, but is, you know, how can we reconnect and really kind of work through a lot of these issues that are coming up societally as a result of being disconnected. You know, social media is evil and is the reason why everyone is like this, but you're doing such a fantastic job of repurposing like Instagram and these other medias to really form unique connections with people. What would be any last advice for somebody just in terms of looking for more connection? How do we do it?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that it starts with you. Is that like you have to be the person who says the weird thing, who asks the question that feels taboo, who goes and picks up the book, you know, who steps outside the bounds of what you've been told is safe and okay. Because a lot of the times I think our disconnection, ironically, comes from this attempt at control and safety. And so, like, for me, you know, a simple analogy is like there was a large point in growing up for me where it was like, okay, you either play inside these rules or you get punished forever, which is a very scary edge to walk up to and go like, I guess I'm willing to call your bluff on this. But I think regardless of even the specifics of sort of your religious connotations around that, it can feel like that every time. The decision to share what I've been going through with my divorce on social media, kind of, it's less scary now, I would say. Like, you do get used to it, but at the same time, there's like that little bit of a gut check that happens every time. And for me, that's something that I've leaned into practicing, is doing the most uncomfortable things. And so it's like, what would be the least likely thing to go out here? And it's like poorly singing a stream of consciousness thing that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's what we're going to put out here. Crying and processing the grief of my first divorce court date. And for me, the intention is to go, the water's fine. Whatever you're scared of probably isn't this stupid, right? Like, you don't even have to make this big a fool of yourself. But like, if you just want to talk about what you're going through or what your aspiration is, like, I am willing to be the person who pushes that limit so far just to show people that it does not exist, but that you can find people. And if you're listening to this, you know Hannah, you now know me. Reach out to those people, hold on to those people, because those people will show you that it is safe, and that is momentum that you can carry outside of that. Those people do exist. People do care about people. I believe for a long time that like all bosses were abusive jerks, and then I worked with a few people who took incredible care of me, and I was like, oh, this is a totally different thing that is an option. But that it starts with acknowledging the desire you have for that connection, the care that you have to be seen on that level and to see other people on that level, and then to choose to go, I am going to become that person, whether or not anyone else accepts it, receives it, gives me confidence or whatever else for it. I'm going to show up that way. And my experience is that 9.5 out of 10 times you will be floored at the response that you actually get. Like, every part of you that's worried, I'll say for me, like, I had a small example of this, similar but different, where for a long time I was like, if I get divorced, I'm going to be that guy. People are going to think he's a jerk. People are going to think yada, yada, like whatever, right? 0% of that came up. The amount of like support and kindness and people going, I had to do that and it was so difficult, but like, it's going to be the best thing for you guys. And like, you have all that fear of how you're going to get judged and how people are going to respond. And sometimes that happens. I still have a few people who will be like, if you ever catch me crying on my stories, call the cops. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But like, just do it. Just show up, say the weird thing, ask the question, because so often, you know, we're hiding inside this prison of secrecy that we've created with ourselves too. And so, like, even I had a crazy conversation with my sisters the other night, but we were talking about sex stuff and boys and relationships, and it's like, it's a weird conversation because you're my sisters, but also we're all adults, and actually, like, getting to actually just be honest about these things feels so much better than pretending it doesn't happen. And I think that for me is like a North Star that I come back to, is like, we're all experiencing this. We might as well be honest about it. But like, that change always starts with you. So be that person, show up that way, say the weird thing, ask a weird question, send me a DM and ask me something that you think no one should ever ask a stranger. And I'll answer it. And then you'll realize it's not that scary.
Can confirm. A perfect way to end this podcast. Evan, thank you so much for all of your time, your insight, for everything that you have done, and for everything that you will do. I am excited to see and experience it for myself. So that's what we got.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks for all the effort and energy that you put into this and everything else you do. I know firsthand that this stuff's a whole lot of work that can very often go unapplauded. So thank you for the time. Thank you for taking the time to prep and do all your research. And like, this has been such a gift, and I know it's going to be a gift to many people. And that impact of this conversation, how it changes how they show up, will impact their families and their communities and their clients, and that ripples out forever. And no matter how many people listen to any given episode of this, you are making ripples that will go out into the whole world over time. So for all you do and who you are, thank you.